When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
I'm 31 years old now. I'm not my target audience when it comes to Instagram, but I've got a team of 6 student interns that are much closer to the target demographic of high schoolers that we're trying to communicate when it comes to Instagram, and really just kind of relying on them. And again, just be as a leader, creating a safe space for them to try things and to take shots in the dark and just see if something works, right?
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 51 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Chaz Williams, the Executive Director of Social Media for Clemson University. And Clemson is doing all kinds of amazing things right now that I'm excited to have Chaz share. Chaz was also recently named one of South Carolina's best and brightest 35 and under. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate you having me and appreciate you reaching out for this opportunity.
So you're a Clemson alum and you started your journey, correct me if I'm wrong, in social media as a student manager with the baseball team there. What's something, if anything, you can remember just, during those early years when you started or even early months there where it was like, I didn't know that, but that makes complete sense. And it's still something maybe that to this day you're mindful of because it still applies.
One of the things I think that sticks out to me the most is, making sure you have good people on your team that are okay with not necessarily following directive, right? One instance I remember working with the baseball team that kind of supervisor at the time wanted me to get the final score out immediately. And there was an opportunity for us to kind of walk off and win in an exciting fashion. And I felt like the priority needed to be captured in the celebration of that rather than sharing the score within the first 30 seconds of the game being over. Ended up being an incredible piece of content for us that we were able to use for years to come. And so I think, just being able to understand the platforms, being able to, as we've kind of discussed, pivot and change and just kind of go with your gut and having people, now being in a leadership role, understanding that and being okay with people on my team, maybe just kind of taking a shot in the dark and seeing if something works and kind of letting that, let that be. Sometimes you're going to fail, sometimes it won't work out the way you think it will, but not being afraid to kind of, make a jump and do something that just kind of feels right in the moment is something that sticks out to me from those early days.
I listened to you share that and I appreciate you doing it. And authenticity, right, was one of the words that went through my brain. And I feel like, gosh, this word is so overused, Chaz, the last bunch of years. So what do you feel, though, I am curious, makes a piece of content on social feel authentic?
What I tell my teams a lot of times when it comes to being authentic and things coming across as, not feeling super calculated is, making sure that we're spending time in the platforms. And I don't think I do it enough even now. I take advantage of the schedule feature in Slack quite a bit with my team where I'll be looking at stuff late at night or early in the mornings with our got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So my schedule's kind of always up in the air. But I think being present in the platforms is a big piece of that. And then also just, again, building a good team around you, right? Like I'm 31 years old now. I'm not my target audience when it comes to Instagram, but I've got a team of 6 student interns that are much closer to the target demographic of high schoolers that we're trying to communicate when it comes to Instagram, and really just kind of, relying on them. And again, just be, as a leader, creating a safe space for them to try things and to, take shots in the dark and just see if something works, right? I think back to last year, there were some captions that we were talking about of, raise your hand if you're thinking about the Roman Empire right now. And I was like, I don't know what the heck we're talking about, but sure, we'll go for it. Think about, this year it was see how we move in at Clemson, very demure. And I'm like, I don't even know what the word demure means, but I've got people around me that are like, hey, let's give it a shot. And people, go off in the comments on Instagram. Obviously, we're not using that on LinkedIn or Facebook because that audience isn't going to get what the heck we're talking about. But really fortunate to be surrounded by a great team that can kind of help when it comes to that authenticity within our social platforms.
Yeah, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and so I joke with her all the time, and her name's Olivia, and I'll be like, Olivia, slay, and she'll just look at me and roll her eyes like really bad, like, but she's kind of like, you don't even know what that means. And I'm like, well, I do. Remember what your dad does for a living? She's like, oh yeah, and so
Yeah.
I definitely want to circle back in a second to hear more about these student interns, but you hit on something there. We know obviously there's 6 or 7 platforms out there, right? Pretty much that the eyeballs of Gen Z and Gen Alpha behind them spend a massive amount of time on. And Chaz, I think everybody can understand too, all right, there's a lot of senior leaders in marketing and social who get everything you've been said. They understand that they don't necessarily know everything that is, commonplace from the lingo to everything else. Then why do you think so many schools are struggling to adopt more what I would call student-centered practices and like spend more, we'll call it, of their marketing and recruiting efforts on social media? Like, where's the disconnect?
I think one of the challenges we face in higher ed when it comes to social is we are asked to speak to so many different audiences, right? And everyone prioritizes those audiences differently. I come from a background, I made the transition from athletics to academics and started in the admissions office. So I have a lot of value and appreciation for the work that our admissions team does from a student recruitment standpoint. Obviously, here we're very fortunate to be very forward thinking in the way that that we did some things years ago and continue to do that in social specifically. But I think one of the challenges, and we're seeing it even as we try to track some of our analytics, is if I send an email to a student that's in our CRM, I can track everything they're doing from there, right? And that value is very obvious. I can see, okay, they got this email, they click the link, then as they progress through the funnel, it's very clear, it's very clear cut. But when it comes to social, a lot of times it's just creating that awareness of what opportunities exist at your university, right? And it's hard to put a value of hey, we've created this much more awareness in this specific area of the country, or with this specific demographic. Our leadership here at the university really values the work that we do on social. They understand the importance of it from an awareness standpoint, but it's not always just clear cut X's and O's of hey, this post drove this many applications, which drove this many students to then enroll. Makes it challenging, and I think that's probably where a lot of the leaders kind of struggle to get that buy-in and that support behind them when it comes to the social space.
No, I think those are all valid points, and there are points that I hear all the time, right? I mean, obviously, it can be as basic as budget and bandwidth. Obviously, there's that whole aspect of it too. But it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure. Colleges talk all the time about, yield tactics. And I'm like, yeah, but yield starts the moment a student is aware of Clemson in your example,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that could be as a high school freshman. How do we know at what point in time that student goes, yep, Clemson's the place I want to go? It's a culmination a lot of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all the emails. It's what I saw on Instagram. It's when I went and visited and all of that. And so I think measurement without question is challenging. I keep going back to this idea of, all right, if they were just spending a little bit of time or maybe half the time on, Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and these other platforms, fine. But we know, again, right? Prospective and current students, literally, they spend all of their time when they're not in school, right? Or playing their sport or working, if they have a part-time or full-time job. This is where they go. And I struggle, if I'm being honest with you, when I get pushback, Chaz, from senior leaders in your position or in marketing positions who are like, but Jeremy, one of the big reasons we're not doing it is, how do we keep it on brand? And I'm like, well, what do you think brand means? And they're like, well, brand is, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not what a 17-year-old or even a 21-year-old thinks brand is. And so I would love to get your take on this statement that I'm about to make, which is, I believe brand is what people say about you and everybody else who's affiliated with Clemson, current students, former students, faculty, the person serving in the, cafeteria, the coaches. It's what everybody else says about you when you're not around. Like, brand is your people. And if we know that, again, we have these platforms where we can showcase authentic pieces about people, any thoughts on that whole statement there?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we know as we think about the recruitment process is if we can get somebody to come to campus, chances are they're, we've got them, right? That's kind of our main selling point, because everyone talks about when you're here, there's just something special about this place. And to me, it's the people here that make the place, right? And there's just a unique type and breed of people that are here. When you're here, you feel it. It's contagious. You can't quite put your hands on it. It's just, there's a poem that says there's just something in these hills, right? And there truly is something in these hills. And as from a brand standpoint, it is so much about our people, and the people at Clemson are just special. They're different. They're welcoming. You think about, this past weekend we welcomed Stanford to campus for the first time as a conference opponent, and that just the outpouring of positivity from those fans as they come to campus for the first time. It was the same way with Louisville several years ago when we welcomed them to campus for the first time. There's just something different about this place and the people at this place that you just can't quite put your finger on. And to me, that's the brand that we're talking about, right? And we can do as much as we want to, help improve the brand and that sort of thing. But if we're taking care of our people and we're doing good things with the people that are here, the brand's going to take care of itself.
I would love to dive in more. Those 6 student interns you mentioned, they were there when you started at Clemson. That's something you started. How did that all come about?
So when I was in athletics, obviously, I was a student where I was one of the students at the time, right? And I contributed to the work that was happening in social, in addition to kind of my managerial duties. But then when I made the move to the academic side, we had a team of, I believe it was 2 interns at the time. One was responsible pretty much for capturing all video content. The other was responsible for capturing pretty much all photo content. And as things have evolved, and our department has changed and grown and centralized and that sort of thing over the past several years, we now have a fully dedicated team of creatives that I can reach out to at any point. And so now the 6 interns that we have, they manage what we call our hub content. So those are regular recurring pieces of content that we can just kind of, hey, how do we show off a unique place on campus, a physical space on campus? We call that Tour Tuesday. So it runs on Tuesdays. Students are able to go capture the content that we need. It might run on Instagram stories. It might be a reel. It might be a photo carousel. It just kind of depends on the nature of the space and which one of the platforms within the platform we think makes the most sense. But they're the ones, that are responsible for capturing a lot of that. And then, being at an institution of higher ed, a lot of times the activities happen on nights and weekends and that sort of thing. And we don't always have full-time staff available to go to those, but we've identified the right students that are hungry, that are passionate about this place, or passionate about, showing this place off to as many people as they can. And so, a lot of times they're the ones that we're sending to events. One of the big perks of being an intern on our team is you get to work the football games, right? So they're the ones on the field. We've got photo interns, we've got full-time video team that are there, but they're the ones capturing Instagram stories and building out Instagram reels in real time for us. And that's one of the big perks and the big selling points for it. Again, we've obviously grown from 2 interns to now we've got a team of 6. And we're really fortunate. We have a program here on campus called UPIC, where students get course credit, but then the UPIC office is within our Career Services Center. They pay half of their salary, and then the department's responsible for the other half of it. And so it's a great opportunity for the students, but then it works out really well financially for us as well. We have students, we usually try and find them sophomore year, because once we find a good one, we get them trained up. Like, they just kind of run the show for us a lot of times. And, there's times where they pitch stuff to us and I go, yeah, that's cool, but there's no way in heck we can do that. Appreciate you pitching it, but, and that's totally fine. Again, I talked earlier about creating an environment where they can pitch ideas and, kind of take big swings. And there's no way we could do the work we do without the students. But, again, we've really built a great system to where a lot of that stuff is automated. It's very, hey, here's what we need you to do, follow this plan, and it's everything's going to work out the way we need it to. But then also freeing them up to again take some of those big swings for us has been a big key to the success we found.
If I'm listening to this and I work at, say, a small private Chaz, and I'm a 1 or 2 person shop, you talked obviously about having a videographer, and you talked about people who are doing photo stuff. What advice would you give to somebody if they're like, listen, I'd love to have a team of 6, but realistically, maybe I can find 1 or 2? Like, is there a position that you think is more important, one over the other? Meaning you got to have a videographer in 2024 first, or no, it's just a student who's really good at creativity and can come up with ideas. Like, any thoughts on where, with a smaller budget, to kind of place your resources and emphasis?
Yeah, I would say really kind of from a student standpoint, really focusing on that creativity, right? You need people that are hungry, that are willing to come up with new ideas, willing to go out. Think about some of the homecoming stuff we had last week. They're willing to go to, Bowman Field at 10 o'clock at night, right? You just need somebody that's passionate about the work that they're doing, passionate about the place they're doing it for, and have some sort of a creative eye to capture this stuff. I think, in addition to my role as within the division as executive director of social media, I also teach a video and motion graphics course as an adjunct lecturer. And, I tell my students all the time, like, we're in a really unique time when it comes to creativity with social specifically, because the platform is telling us what sound to use. They're telling us what visuals to use, and we all have the ability to capture it right in our pockets. Right. And so between those three things, like, yes, there's times where you need a full-time, videographer that can, really capture things the right way. And the homecoming piece that we're producing right now is one of those, right? Like, you could shoot it on an iPhone, but it's going to have so much more value if you're capturing on professional equipment. But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing on social is just shot on an iPhone at home, and the idea is right there for you. So, again, it's a unique time for sure, but I would really kind of focus on someone that's got a little bit of a creative eye, passion for the place, and passion for the work that they're doing.
So let's talk about creativity then for a second. You referenced earlier, sometimes your team will bring you ideas and you're like, that's great, guys, but yeah, we're not doing that, right? I know you have this video series, right, called In These Hills, which again showed things leading up to homecoming. And if I have this right, it sounds like that idea was first pitched by a team member last fall, but had to be tabled, right, for a year.
Yeah.
So how do you, as a leader, for anybody listening to this who is a leader or wants to be in a position of leadership, how do you encourage your team to continually be creative, Chaz, and bring those ideas to the table and not have them go, gosh, he turned me down again for like the 4th time? Even if, to your point, they're all amazing ideas, but whether it's timing, bandwidth, whatever. So just anything that you would offer that you think would be good tips on how do I keep my team creative, even though, let's be honest, they're going to have to hear no sometimes.
Yeah, I think, the homecoming piece in particular is a unique experience because, between my team, we were kind of the ones that were pitching it to our video team of like, hey, we've got this really good idea that we think we need to execute on. And they were the ones that kind of told us no. And yeah, like that, at the time that sucked to hear, right? Like, we had reached out to some students and felt like we kind of had the ball rolling in the right direction. And, they were like, hey, let us check our calendar. Let's see what we can do. They came back to us and said, hey, like, we just don't think we can pull this off. If y'all want to try to do it, like, go for it. But it really is a really good lesson in no doesn't mean no forever. Sometimes it just means not now. And had we tried to squeeze that in last year, we wouldn't have had nearly the storyline that we ended up with this time around, right? So we were really able to, again, once we kind of got over, hey, that really sucks. Like, this could have been something really cool. Took an opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, hey, let's think about how do we want to do this and do it the right way. And so we've been filming with some of these students since February of this year, right? And it's, homecoming week was last week. So the last week of September, the challenges that those students faced throughout the week, it was a shortened week with the hurricane that kind of came through our area. So what they would typically build in 5.5 days, they built in 3, 2 and some change. I think it's part of capturing as a documentary style, but like, our team felt that same, a lot of those same emotions as the students were going through. And so I think, that's going to be one that we kind of hang our hat on for a while now of, hey, just because we're saying no doesn't mean it's no forever. It means not now. And there's some ideas that like no means, yeah, there's no way we're ever going to do that. And that's okay. But again, just continue to encourage your team of like, hey, this is why, right? I think that's a big part of it too, is, the video team came to us and said, we just don't think we can do the credit to the story that it deserves at the time. And now to see what it's produced over the past, almost 8 months now has been really cool to see. And it's like very much that light bulb moment of, yeah, like, we did this the right way. We took a step back and we've produced something that everyone can be really, really proud of. I think some of the struggles too, as I've been in this position now for almost 2 years, and the evolution of kind of leading a team for the first time and that sort of thing is, sometimes there are conversations that happen above us where our leadership within our division tells us, no, you can't do that. And that's just the answer. Right. And so unfortunately, there's times where you can't always give that context, but if you set your team up, the right way, give that context as often as you can. When you do get in a scenario of like, hey, like leadership has just said we can't do that, then they're okay. It's like, okay, like there's a bigger picture here that I'm not privy to, and that's totally fine. And then you're able to kind of hit the ground running on the next idea. So that's definitely been one of the challenges, again, as a kind of young leader in this space, is, sometimes it's just no. And that's just kind of how it goes. There's conversations that, are higher up than you. So.
Totally understand. And again, it's just letting your team know that in a way that, again, to your point, doesn't necessarily throw people above you under the bus, but kind of makes it clear that, hey, as a leadership team, we've talked, and listen, the answer just is no. And there are a whole bunch of reasons behind it. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that it was a bad idea. It's just, it's not going to work with this time. We've got to focus our efforts elsewhere and, try to move on. I would be curious to know, you talked, earlier in our chat about, all right, the platforms out there are kind of telling us what content obviously is resonating. And, for those listening to this, I'm sure everybody understands, right? The algorithms have really changed since TikTok came around. And now the content that gets prioritized, right, is the content that we all find interesting. You can have 0 followers or 2 followers. You don't need 200,000. So how have you all adjusted strategies, or have you, Chaz, since those, algorithms have really changed, in terms of, all right, well, the content and the creative, now it's just a matter of what resonates with our audience?
Yeah. So, when I first joined the team, it was definitely a space where it was all about quantity, right? And you could post some stuff that probably wasn't your best work, and chances are it might go off, right? And as the algorithm has changed and the platforms have evolved, we really kind of have a quality over quantity mindset now, right? We're not posting nearly as often as we are, but the pieces that we are sharing, we want to make sure that we're doing the best work we can do from a quality standpoint. I think that's kind of the quality over quantity mindset has been a recent mindset shift that we've made over the past several years. And I think one of the proud moments for me in our last fiscal years, our top performing piece of content on each platform was different, right? And so the audiences are different within the spaces, the algorithms within the platforms are different. So the way that we tell the story is different, right? That doesn't mean we can't tell the same story across every platform we have. Again, I keep talking about this homecoming series because that's kind of where we're at right now. But, the way we've told that story on Instagram is very different than how we did on Facebook, and very different than how we would on LinkedIn. It's not just a copy and paste across all 6, 7, 8 platforms, however many it ends up being. It's understanding those audiences and understanding how they're going to consume the content, so that you can position yourself to resonate with them. Because that the audience engagement is a huge driver of it now, where, again, when I first started, it was just make sure you're at the top of their feed as often as you can. And that's the best way to get your stuff seen. So share as often as you can.
So can you expand on that? Because I think it would be helpful for the audience when you are repurposing content, if you are going to, talk about how you've, for example, posted and shaped the homecoming story differently on Instagram than on YouTube, than on Facebook.
Yeah. So, again, with the homecoming piece specifically, there's probably 6 or 7 students we've really kind of honed in on. As we're telling the story of homecoming, some of those students are popping up in some of the carousels that we're capturing, right? They're not just showing up in the video series. We produce a reel that was teasing out the episode that we were able to reshare our story on Instagram, specifically with episode 1. Episode 2, we had a different format of that same teaser, different copy, right? Because we understand that one of the things I've heard before that really resonates with me with the platforms is with Instagram, the visuals come first and the copy comes second. On Facebook, the copy comes first and the visual comes second, right? And so the value in those pieces of creative is very different. And so the copy is very different on Facebook, and the visuals look a little bit different too. And then with episode 2, we actually realized, hey, if we could streamline the way that we're getting people to watch this rather than trying to send everyone to YouTube, we might pick up some additional views, especially on Facebook. And so we posted the entire episode on Facebook. It's just like a learning thing, right? We hadn't done a whole lot of long form content like this. And really just, again, kind of taking that big swing of, hey, we think there's something here to really tell the story of what goes into homecoming. Everyone always sees the completed project on Saturday when they come to campus, but they have no idea that the first meetings for this start in February, and that the students are raising all this money and are, going to all the local grocery stores and buying up just about every canned food they can to contribute to a Paul Pantry, which then, this year obviously was able to immediately go back into the community with the storm that we had hit just a few days after they were kind of completed. And so, yeah, it's definitely, how do we package the story in different ways? And sometimes that means that, we might only tell a story on LinkedIn and it doesn't touch Instagram. But there's sometimes, it's a big enough story that, hey, it needs to touch all of these. And again, being an active member of those audiences, understanding how the content's being consumed and how you go about consuming content can really help inform the way in which you go about packaging that. But it also takes the ability to communicate that to creatives. Definitely been a challenge for us before of like, hey, we need this video in a vertical format. And our video team's like, well, that doesn't work. Like, that's not going to work for us. But now we've kind of got that buy-in from them of like, hey, like we know that's how it needs to be because that's how the platforms format it. And it's been a really good evolution and continues to evolve as the platforms continue to change. So
walk us through, if you're comfortable sharing, just what does the given process look like, for example, you at Clemson, or just what you've seen work well when it comes to building out a content calendar? So like, how are you deciding? Is it the summer before the school year starts? Is it, Jeremy, honestly, we break it into quarters. Like, how are you deciding? And ultimately, how are the current students, those 6 interns, right? I assume they're involved in this process. Like, what does that look like in terms of the role they play in shaping the content calendar too?
I would love to say that we have like the whole year planned out a year ahead of time, but that's definitely not the case. Each summer, or the past 2 summers, we've done a really good job of sitting down with our creative team and really diving into, hey, these are the top performing pieces of content and why we think they performed really well. It's kind of that light bulb moment with that team to understand, we can send them a weekly analytics report and say, hey, here was the engagement rate for the week, but they don't truly understand what that means. And so we can really go, hey, these are the top 10 pieces of content, and this is what how they were different from others. So that's been a really big piece for us as we look to map out what the next year is going to look like. Talk about kind of those, we call them hub pieces of content, those recurring pieces of content. And it's like, hey, this one piece, like we thought it would do really well and it just isn't performing. So maybe it's time to sunset it, but also know that, hey, we've got that in our back pocket if we end up needing it down the road of like, hey, we're trying to highlight an alum and here's how we could potentially go about doing it because it's performed well for us in the past. And so those creative meetings that we have in the summer, they're bigger meetings. We have a weekly kind of creative team meeting that we hold every Wednesday, but that summer one, we really block out, half a day, really just kind of dive in what performed well for us in the past. And then we also over the summer really try to think through, okay, these are all the, one of the unique things about being in higher ed is the calendar is very cyclical, right? Like we know we're going to have move-in, we're going to have convocation, we're going to have homecoming, we're going to have, final exams, we're going to have graduation in December. Like all that stuff is pretty set out, pretty far ahead. And so we have the opportunity to kind of go through and say, hey, here's all the events we know about now. And these are ways that we could plug in and think through some of that hub content. So one of the pieces we have is our student of the week. So in addition to the at Clemson University Instagram account, we also have an at Clemson students account. And so I tell people, I think of that as kind of being like our micro influencer program, right? And so it's an opportunity for us to kind of take the megaphone away from ourselves and let the students talk about their experience authentically. And so each week there's a new student that posts on that account. And then one day a week, they take over and kind of show like a day in the life on the Instagram story of the main university account. And so a lot of that we kind of had mapped out well ahead of time. But then some of the other pieces, we have a piece on Sunday called This Week in Clemson that highlights upcoming events that we have that week. A lot of times that's just like the week before, like what events are happening because, unfortunately everyone doesn't have their entire calendar planned out for the entire year. And I think, obviously, the past week and the kind of crisis communication phase we had to move into a lot of, we had things planned, we have to pull those. And so it's being agile and being able to kind of evolve your plan as much as you can. Because I don't think if anyone's telling you they've got the whole year planned out and everything's scheduled out a year in advance, there's no way they're telling you the truth, in my opinion.
I love the fact that, you really involve your interns in that. I've had people on here before who have talked about the value of just, having student interns and, really encouraging those student interns. Hey, speak up. Like if you think, that's a bad idea, you don't want to do that. Like giving them a safe space to be able to say that. And that's hard. I can tell you a lot of leaders are like, they don't do it because they don't want to hear right that and basically have, oh, great, I'm having a 17 or an 18 or a 21-year-old tell me that like, I don't know how to do my job. No, they're just telling you that, hey, that may not resonate the way you think. And here's why. And being flexible, like what else? I mean, if you had to pick one or two other words, besides being flexible in your role, like what are such important traits that if somebody in your role doesn't have, yeah, it's going to be a real struggle for them to maintain and reach the goals that I'm sure you have set.
Yeah, so definitely think, being flexible on things, but then also making sure that you have a strong plan of attack on everything, right? So, talk about our creative team, and we're incredibly fortunate for that group, but there were definitely struggles where, hey, we need this turned around like today, right? And that just doesn't always happen. But by, kind of automating some of the content that we do have, it's allowed us to, hey, when we do have those one-off things, we've taken some of the workload off their plate because they're working in the summers to kind of build out, hey, what's this going to look like stylistically? How can we develop some of these templates? I don't want to say templates, but just this format and brand for this kind of hub piece of content, so that when we do have those pieces pop up, we have the ability to be agile and be flexible. I think is a big part of it. I think the other thing is, again, just finding a passion for the work that you do is a huge part of it, right? I said it earlier, but our interns are passionate about this place. They're passionate about the work that they get to do. It's not just hey, I got to go do this job so I can punch the clock and earn a paycheck, right? Like they love coming in, like they pop into my office all the time just to catch up, and that's a big part of it. So I'd say, between being agile, being flexible, making sure that you got people that find a passion for the work they do is a big part of it as well.
Video versus pictures. I get this question a lot, and I'm curious your thoughts on it, right? Like, we know the way the platforms are set up, right? And obviously certain platforms are going to be more video, certain platforms are going to be more pictures. Just any thoughts on what's the right balance? And you know what, even is there a right balance?
As they continue to evolve, the platforms, might tell us one thing, and other times we see others. So, I think back to even last year, right? The platform, you think about Instagram specifically, we heard so many times from their leadership that they're prioritizing reels, and reels are going to outperform photos. And we just never really saw that happen, right? Like our photo content continued to perform really well for us. We had a piece, again, thinking back to last year with Tanner Smith, who's member of our Clemson Life program. Life stands for learning is for everyone. And so Tanner was also a star on Netflix Love on the Spectrum. And we were able to kind of talk with him. And that piece really went off for us, right? It ends up 1.3, 1.4 million views on Instagram. And those are the ones you can't plan for, but you have to be flexible and agile to be able to position yourself for it. But so there's definitely opportunities where the video content really kind of outperforms, but for us, bread and butter is just kind of those campus photos really, really kind of do well for us. We think about from a photo content standpoint, the more faces we can get into that, the better, right? The people love to, hey, see themselves or see their friends on the accounts, and that that usually kind of helps from a comment section standpoint. One thing I've even talked with my team about here recently, when it comes to video content on Instagram specifically, obviously we're doing the homecoming piece, which is focused on people, but moving forward, should video content really just focus on the place, right? And that's sort of what we think about platform by platform. Instagram to me is kind of about the place. We can definitely highlight the people in a unique way, but looking back at some of our top content outside of those kind of viral moments, so to speak, and I hate even using that word as someone that works in social, but those pieces that really perform well and are kind of unexpected for us, you take some of those away, and it's this place and the beauty of this place, and just a simple walk across campus sometimes can outperform some of the more produced video pieces that we are doing. So it's definitely a balance. As we mentioned, the platforms are very different, and the way we kind of approach that certainly changes. But for us, we're still seeing the photos perform really well for us, and really kind of lean into those as using video when we can here and there and that sort of thing. But the photos do continue to perform really well for us.
Well, I appreciate you feeling so comfortable sharing today. I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. The last thing I do on every episode is fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a few things, and I want to get some quick thoughts on each one from you, okay?
Okay.
Bigger Clemson rival, South Carolina, Georgia, or Florida State?
South Carolina. I told my team this morning when I was applying to schools, I'd only applied to Clemson. My parents told me if I didn't apply to South Carolina by the end of the week, or if I didn't apply to 4 other schools by the end of the week, they'd make me apply to South Carolina. So I applied to 4 other schools by the end of the week. Got some great colleagues there that I interact with, but yeah, definitely the biggest rival there.
Understood. My wife is an Indiana University grad. She'd say the same thing that you're saying about South Carolina, about Purdue. So I fully comprehend. You're obviously a big baseball fan. So who's going to win the World Series?
Transparently, I have not watched more than 5 innings of professional baseball this year, so I don't have a dang clue. Regionally, I would say let's go Braves.
Easier thing to do, hit a fastball or create a video that goes viral?
Video that goes viral. You can swing in the same spot at some point, the ball will hit it.
And rumor has it you like to ski. So where's a dream destination that you would absolutely be up for if it would fit?
It's hard to beat Deer Valley. Have an opportunity to ski there kind of every other year in Utah. Fun fact, my wife's family taught me to water ski and snow ski in the same year. I'd never been on either one of them. So they've got me.
What's harder to do?
I would say water skiing for sure. I feel like I've been at that long enough and still hadn't quite got the hang of it, but I can get up and can get around a few balls here and there. So, but yeah, snow skiing, incredibly fortunate to be able to get to visit Deer Valley fairly often. And I'm not sure you can top that.
Well, Chaz, I appreciate you being on today. As I said, I know you've got a lot, happening just because of where we're at right now in early October in this country. So I appreciate you being able to get on and just share these things. And I look forward to the next time that we chat and seeing what the Clemson socials come up with next.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate the time.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.